I'm drinking tea, which seems fairly fitting for this video. What is up? Worst New York Times op-ed I've read in the last month of doing the New York Times vlog videos. And, I do have a few more days, so there could be a worse article. But whatever, I just want to record this now. And without further ado, reading Orwell for the 4th of July by Bret Stephens, published on the 3rd of July. Also, can we talk about how lame these mustaches are from the 30s and 40s? I mean, come on, man. What is that? What? There's a caterpillar there. Come on, Orwell. Now, this article by Bret Stephens is weaker and worse than that mustache. That's my opinion of the article. And why do I think it's bad? Well, let's get into it. So, first of all, I want to say there's this trend among New York Times op-ed writers of not getting to their damn point until close to the end of the article. This article is no exception. It looks like there are 9 people mentioned before Orwell is mentioned in the article, and Orwell is in the title. And keep in mind, these are short 500-word articles, maybe. So, the first 3/4 of this article is just him being Russia bad, China bad, it's hot takes on 4th of July weekend. So after the first 7 paragraphs of just grandstanding on clear and obvious bad things like Putin's authoritarianism or, stuff like that, he starts saying things that are very dumb. Paragraph 8. The more serious problem today comes from the left, from liberal elites who, when tested, lack the courage of their liberal convictions, from so-called progressives whose core convictions were never liberal to begin with, from administrative types at nonprofits and corporations who, with only vague convictions of their own, don't want to be on the wrong side of a PR headache. Here we see another issue that I've had with multiple New York Times op-ed writers, but it's particularly egregious here. The conflation of left and liberal. I'm left. If you want to piss me off, call me a liberal. How many times is Bernie Sanders called a liberal, right? And it's not that he wants to abolish free speech or it's not like he has anti-liberal views or anything. It's just that because our ideologies are more socialist, democratic socialist, or social democrat, depending on the situation, calling us liberal, which is an explicitly capitalist ideology, doesn't make any sense. Even though some liberals share some values with the left, such as free speech. And I know a lot of times when I read these articles and the phrase out of touch comes to my mind, this consistent mistake by many of their opinion writers is a great example of out of touchness. Half of my generation has a more favorable view of socialism than it does capitalism. And you may disagree with that, you may agree with that, but you shouldn't disagree with the concept of categorizing socialist beliefs properly. And again, stuff very important in the context of this article, George Orwell, strong socialist, strong Marxist, and very unapologetic with his political views. Also, a huge free speech activist. And it's relevant for this article because George Orwell's name is in the darn title. Stephens also takes this dumb analogy of comparing and misidentifying left as something that it's clearly not by comparing left to liberal corporation owners. To me, someone who might be left of your average Republican politician in Washington, such as Bill Gates maybe, or, Warren Buffett, or Jeff Bezos, or, any of those guys, Mark Zuckerberg, whoever, Howard Schultz. These people are all far to the right of me. And not only that, they're far to the right of far over half of my generation. And not only that, they're far to the right of probably half of our population on basically every economic issue. A great example of this is Michael Bloomberg saying we need to cut the number of teachers we have in half. That's extremely right-wing. I would be shocked if over 10% of teachers in this country shared his opinion. That's how off the wall his views are in terms of being right-wing. But he ran in the Democratic Party, so presumably he's like left of center. But it's out of touch both in terms of Gates and like Bloomberg wanting to cut the number of teachers. That's out of touch. Far right out of touch. But it's also out of touch for Stephens to lump those people with the left, when clearly they're certainly right on economics. They might be left on social issues, or I'm not even sure. I mean, some of them are left on social issues, some aren't, but they're all pretty far right on economic issues. And I mean, some of the things he says here I agree with, but he's just saying them about the left. That's the part that's incorrect. But I agree, from administrative types at nonprofits and corporations who only with vague convictions of their own don't want to be on the wrong side of a PR headache. Sure, totally agree with that. Those corporate leaders are not on the left. They may be chill with gay marriage or something, but that doesn't make you on the left. Michael Bloomberg being chill with gay marriage, but wanting to cut half the teachers. Would you say he's a left-winger or a right-winger? Or, you could put him in the center somewhere, somewhat left on social issues, far right on economic and education and healthcare and, all these other issues. Sure, that's fine. But he's definitely not on the left. And, to be clear, Stephens isn't saying Bloomberg, I'm saying Bloomberg, but I literally don't know who he's talking about. Bret Stephens, show me a socialist leader of a Fortune 500 company. Show it to me. Someone who's openly socialist, who openly endorsed Bernie Sanders, or is openly to the left of Bernie Sanders. Show me a Marxist. Come on, man, give me a break. The left. Next paragraph. Stephens talks about cancel culture. Take a drink. Now, of course, none of the three instances of freedom of speech that Stephens brings up actually involves violating the First Amendment, or, in other words, none of these examples involve the government suppressing freedom of speech, but then he kind of changes what he's saying in the next paragraph to the idea of freedom of speech being violated. Stephens is just really, really into the idea of freedom of speech. He would never try to do something like get someone fired or anything like that. More on that later. Quote, but those defenders are, on account of one excuse or another, capitulating to people who claim free speech for themselves, but not for others. Okay, all right. So Bret Stephens is on some free speech high horse right now. So let's take slavery. In 1840, it is my First Amendment right to buy and sell slaves. So you're going to try to take away my slaves and take away my freedom of speech to use slaves to harvest my fields? That's freedom of speech, dude. It's freedom of speech. I can't believe you're by even suggesting me do that. You're attacking the idea of freedom of speech. Why would you do that? That's the logical conclusion of Bret Stephens' argument of platforming freedom of speech higher than any other issue. Now, Bret Stephens, well, he of course, he's never written an article about someone he disagrees with very small platform, very small public following. He's never tried to get someone fired, right? He's a free speech warrior. Just the idea of attacking freedom of speech against anyone. Oh my God, the horror. Okay. Under 12 months ago, of course he tried to take someone's freedom of speech away. Stephens wrote an article about a professor that said something that he thought was anti-Semitic. It's kind of up for debate among the Jewish community about whether or not it actually was anti-Semitic, and I'm definitely not an expert at that. But this tweet that was allegedly anti-Semitic had 9 likes on Twitter. This man had a very small platform. He was the professor at a college. So why on earth is Bret Stevenson publishing an article about some low-profile person who's saying something that Stevens disagrees with? I mean, like, what's more discriminatory? Let's be honest. Is blackface more discriminatory? Or is calling someone a bedbug more discriminatory? Like, come on, man. Blackface is way worse. Are you kidding me? Now, this is relevant because in this article, Stevens gives the example of suppression of freedom of speech when someone wore blackface to a party, and then there was an article written about it in the Washington Post, and then she ended up getting fired from her job, even though she's not like a prominent person or anything. However, Stevens is okay with trying to get a non-prominent person fired if it's speech that he personally doesn't like and he personally is more offended by. And like, that tweet was probably seen by less people than the person who wore blackface to the party, because supposedly over 100 people were at that party. So, and the tweet had 9 likes. So, and like, oh my God, guys, oh my God, this video's like gotta be over 8 minutes in and we haven't talked about Orwell yet. The anatomy of covering bad writers. Okay. Man, I can't believe Bret Stephens tried to fire someone who had beliefs that he disagreed with. The idea of free speech, how will we ever recover? I just want him to have like some sort of consistency. Like, if you're against cancel culture, don't participate in cancel culture. Orwell. We're finally at Orwell. Gosh, I can get the entire Orwell part easily in a screenshot. Man, it's a good thing I'm drinking tea and not alcohol, because Stevens is doing another stupid common thing that people do when writing. Was Orwell in favor of free speech? Yes, of course he was. Orwell had a lot of unconventional opinions, actually. He was a socialist Marxist. But shh. We don't talk about that. We don't use those words here. We like to compare liberals to the left because we're just so smart here at the New York Times. All right, but let's get into the content because this is so dumb. Oh my gosh. So Stevens quotes a line from 1984, which is probably Orwell's most famous book, and it's kind of boring, but it's very profound in some of its political statements and stuff, and like linguistics and stuff of that nature. So the quote from Orwell is, "Every book has been rewritten, every picture has been repainted, every statue and street and building has been renamed, every date has been altered." And he's against taking down the current statues that are very clearly revisionist history. Like, the point, whoosh, like, okay, so let's say there's a statue in your town of a Confederate general, okay? Now, does that statue say, this man was fighting strongly in favor on the side of keeping slavery? Does the statue say that? No, it's probably like, great Confederate general fighting against tyranny, like whatever. It's probably the most revisionist plaque under that statue you've ever seen. And Stevens is just missing that. We are against the revisionist history on those statues. I say we, like I'm taking down statues. I'm not taking down statues. But like, most of the statues they're taking down are super revisionist. Trying to take away the clear and obvious revisionist history of many of these statues, that's like what Orwell was fighting against. Like, that's, or at least that's what his comment here is saying. Hey, these revisionist histories on these statues are bad and we shouldn't have them. Now, I don't know if he's explicitly in favor of getting rid of all the revisionist history, but he's certainly against making a monument dedicated to revisionist history, like a lot of these Confederate general statues are. Stephens is insufferable when talking about Orwell. Look at this paragraph. Orwell's concern then was not just with Russian totalitarianism, but with the arguments used by much of Western intelligentsia to justify its repression. Ooh, okay, so we've got a little, like, two different characterizations of what's going on here. So yeah, against Russian totalitarianism, good, that's an accurate characterization. Now, what does Western intelligentsia mean? What does that mean? It couldn't be referring to capitalism now, could it? We don't criticize capitalism. This is the New York Times. We don't criticize capitalism here. I mean, look at this. Look at this. He's suppressing George Orwell's free speech. I mean, he's not allowing him to criticize capitalism openly in his articles. Free speech. It's free speech. George Orwell oppressed. All right. Now, this sentence makes me go ballistic because I've read Stephens for the last month. Right now, all of the Twitter fervors, the angry rows over publication decisions, the canceled speeches and books, the semantic battles about which words take an uppercase and which don't, may seem remote to those who care about more tangible issues. Depression, disease, police abuse, urban decline. My dude, I've read your last articles. They don't talk about fixing those problems. They don't. Stephens prefers to talk about the damn statues. That's what he talks about. He talks about free speech. He's like, free speech, it's not letting me talk about these issues that I don't talk about. Oh my God. Stephens, just the worst, honestly. There's no value here. If someone told me they read Bret Stephens weekly and think he's like really on the ball, I will have a lower opinion of you. and I'm sorry, but it's just true. I don't even know how to end this video. This is bad. And I'm not trying to stifle Bret Stephens' freedom of speech. I just think he's dumb. So to be clear, whatever. I know Stephens likes to go at people who have 9 likes on social media platforms. Guys, if this video gets 9 likes on YouTube, hopefully Bret Stephens writes an article about me. That would be amazing, wouldn't it? Oh my God. All right, that's it. Bye. Post-video fact check. Stephens has 6 articles on his New York Times page. 3 of them are about statues. One is the Orwell one we just read, so it's about free speech. One is like Biden horse race nonsense. And then the last one is about crime in cities and his opinions of how to reduce it. And I disagree with many of his opinions posed in that article. But I guess it is about an actual issue that affects people. So 1 out of 6. I'm pretty sure I have more videos on my channel that are about problems that affect everyday people than what Stephens has. Like, I'm pretty sure my ratio is better than 1 out of 6. And I like talk about fantasy books half the time. So that's that. See you next time.